Hi, John Dickson here from the Centre for Public Christianity. I'm very conscious that what follows will easily be pegged by those who want to as nitpicking, the kind of thing you do when you can't find a hole in the larger argument you're confronting. But as I see it, there are plenty of people taking on Professors Dawkins, Hitchens and Onfray at the macro level and doing a pretty good job at it. I'm deliberately choosing a small target and asking people to consider whether I hit that target and whether this has some implications for the credibility of the New Atheist project. Now, I know I'll be dismissed by those close to Professor Dawkins as a flea on the great man's back. This is a favourite metaphor which he himself started. He once described Professor Alistair McGrath, a man with 2 doctorates from Oxford and just as many books to his name as Dawkins, as a flea on his back, which of course makes me much less than a flea, and I'm very comfortable with that. But here's my contention. In their zeal to further the atheist cause, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens and Michel Foucault have badly overreached in at least one academic discipline, that of biblical history, and in particular, historical Jesus studies. Now let's be clear, I'm not talking about theology, which the New Atheists consider a non-discipline. I'm talking about the historical study of Jesus, a field thriving throughout universities around the world. Subjecting these authors to historical assessment might seem a little unfair, since none of them actually claims to be a professional historian. And typically, I think it's right to cut people some slack when they humbly venture outside their area of specialty. But the size and confidence of some of the New Atheist claims and the academic high ground they constantly claim for themselves invite those of us with an interest in good history to ask the question, have they delivered it? I note that professional philosophers are asking questions about the philosophy of the New Atheists. Thomas Nagel is Professor of Philosophy at New York University and a well-known atheist. In his review of the God Delusion in the New Republic Journal, he chides Dawkins for what he calls his particularly weak and amateur philosophy. I guess I'm going to say something similar about the historical sections of the New Atheist literature. The number of historical errors and significant historical misrepresentations in Dawkins, Hitchens and Onfray raises a question for me, not about their natural brilliance, which is obvious, but about their academic trustworthiness when it comes to handling information relevant to religious questions. It goes to credibility, as the lawyer might say. I begin with a few small, careless historical errors, the kind of thing you might expect in an undergraduate essay, no offence to undergraduates, but not from authors with professorships. On page 94 of The God Delusion, Professor Dawkins places the biblical story of the Magi or kings worshipping the infant Jesus in the wrong gospel. Now it's more than a typo because he's trying to argue at this point that whereas Matthew invented stories for Jews, descent from King David, birth in Bethlehem, Luke invented stories for non-Jews or Gentiles. Luke's desire, he says, was to adapt Christianity for the Gentiles and hence to press the familiar hot buttons of pagan Hellenistic religions, virgin birth, worship by kings. The Magi story, of course, is found in Matthew chapter 2. That's a very small thing, but it does make me wonder how long it's been since Dawkins has actually opened a Bible. A similar trivial example occurs 2 pages later when Professor Dawkins says that the Gospel of Thomas has numerous anecdotes about the child Jesus abusing his magic powers. The Gospel of Thomas has no such stories. It only contains sayings of Jesus. I think he means the late 2nd century work called the Infancy Story of Thomas. I guess it's an easy mistake to make, like confusing DNA with RNA. But again, it makes me wonder how many of his arguments are cross-checked and how many are just plucked from memory. Christopher Hitchens likewise stumbles over a very basic detail of gospel studies today. He gets confused about the gospel source referred to by scholars as Q. He writes, "The book on which all 4 Gospels may possibly have been based, known speculatively to scholars as Q, has been lost forever." Hitchens has misunderstood the 2 main parts of the Q theory. Q can't be the basis of all 4 Gospels because Q refers to material found in Matthew and Luke only. By definition, it's got nothing to do with Mark and John. And Q accounts for only about 20% of Matthew and Luke, mainly sayings of Jesus. So it's hardly even the basis of those Gospels. This really is New Testament 101, and I can't see how Hitchens could have read anything on this topic and written what he does. Michel Foucault, the famous French philosopher, makes similar small blunders. In listing what he calls the incalculable number of contradictions and improbabilities in the Gospels, he insists that the Gospels get the title of Pontius Pilate wrong. That same Pilate, he writes, could not have been a procurator, as the Gospels call him, for the title of procurator was first used around the year 50 of our era. Pilate's title was prefect of Judea. Now, Onfray's right that Pilate's title was prefect, but he's wrong that the Gospels call him procurator. The Gospels use the word hegemon, just means governor. It's the customary Greek rendering of the Latin prefect. Onfray is just mistaken. I can't resist offering another clear, almost humorous historical misstep on the first page of Onfray's Atheist Manifesto. He suggests that the notion of the afterlife in the three monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, was invented as a way of coping with the misery of their desert origins. Who wouldn't fantasize about heaven when faced with such barren places as Nazareth and Galilee? He writes, "I thought of the lands of Israel, Judea and Samaria, of Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and of Nazareth and the Sea of Galilee, places where the sun bakes men's heads, desiccates their bodies, afflicts their souls with thirst, places that generate a yearning for oases, where water flows cool, clear and free, where the air is balmy and fragrant, where food and drink are abundant. The afterlife suddenly struck me as a counterworld, invented by men exhausted and parched by their ceaseless wanderings across the dunes or up and down rocky trails, baked to white heat." Jews and Muslims will have their own response to this stuff, but in the case of Christianity, this amounts to a clear ecological blunder. Nazareth and surrounding Galilee were not places that generate yearning for oases where food and drink are abundant. They were that place. Open any textbook on the ancient Mediterranean and you'll discover that Galilee was and is renowned for its luscious fertility. The first century Jewish commander of Galilee, Josephus, wrote of the region, "For the land is everywhere so rich in soil and pasturage and produces such a variety of trees that even the most indolent are tempted by these facilities to devote themselves to agriculture." The idea that Christianity's hope for the kingdom was fueled by its desert origins is as false as it is facile. These small errors, and plenty more like them, don't undo atheism, of course. That's not my point. But they do leave me wondering why Onfray, Hitchens and Dawkins aren't more careful when it comes to historical commentary on Jesus. I'm also left asking, how can I be sure there aren't similar mistakes across all of the other fields traversed by these authors, in their science, philosophy, sociology, and so on? It's a question that becomes more relevant when we look at the serious historical misrepresentations in these books.